Hi, it's Mr. Baumgarten here with a quick look at how functions work. So before we get to functions themselves, a quick reminder that programs by themselves will just ordinarily continue one line onto the next line onto the next line. So in this example here, we would print hello world. It would then say doing something 1, doing something 2, doing something 3, and so on until it hits the end of the program. Now we can change the order in which lines would get executed and have our program jump around a little bit through things such as if statements and loops, and we can also use functions. So let's take a quick look at how functions are defined within Python. Here is a simple function which I have called my_function, and I've used the keyword def, short for define. So I am defining something called my function, and then I have to have my open and close parentheses and a colon. You can see down here in the red in my main program then I have the same name, so whatever I called my function I have it down here and the open close parentheses. So effectively what we are doing is we are creating our own Python commands that we can use within the main body of our program. You'll notice that I have indentation happening here. So just like with if statements and loops and everything else, as soon as there's a colon, Python will expect the next line to be indented, and you continue your indentation for as long as you want the code to belong to whatever it was that had the colon on it. So in this case, I am defining this command, this function, and as long as I continue the indentation, Python will treat these lines as belonging to this function. And then when I stop the indentation and return to whatever the original level of indentation was, Python treats that as the end of the function. And so my hello world is not part of the function because it's on the original level of indentation. So let's run this program and see what happens. We start off at the hello world. Python will initially skip over all of the functions defined and will only use them when it encounters the need to. So our program will output hello world, our program will output doing something 1, our program will output doing something 2, but then we encounter this line here, my_function, and Python remembers that we defined something called that earlier on. So Python will then jump up to where our definition is and execute the commands that we've provided for it there. So we will have function 1 output, it will then output function 2, it will then output function 3, and it's then hit the end of the function. What will it do then? It will jump back to the next line after our function declaration, our function call. So we'll now get doing something 3, 4, 5. And so we can call this function, we can use this command as many times as we like. And so part of the point of functions is to allow us to create code that we can easily reuse through just a single command. Because that function code can be as complex as we want. We can have as many if statements and loops, and we can have functions calling other functions, and so on. Let's take a look at another example, and this time you can see that I have something inside my parentheses, both here where I'm defining it and down here where I'm calling the function. Let's take a look at what will happen here. So this time my program will, again, it'll print hello, and I have created a variable called a, and I am initializing it with the value 10. Down here when I call my function, so this variable a is currently set to 10. Python will then jump up to my function declaration and it will set that value and create a variable called num for me with whatever the value was that was given to it when I called the function. So function says hello, will then output, and we'll have a line that says the number was 10 because that is what is in was provided when the function was called. Notice that these variables do not have to be the same names. They can be completely different because Python is effectively creating a new copy up here. It's a little more complicated than that, but just go with that for now. We can perform calculations on this variable. So num currently has the value 10 in it. We're going to add 1 to it, save it back into num. So num will now be updated with the value 11. And we can print out the next number was 11. But the a down here has not changed. The a is still 10. Our program will then exit and print out goodbye for us. Let's take a look at one happening in the actual Python editor. And here I've created a function called add, and I've got two incoming variables, p and q. And I'm going to print out what p is, I'm going to print out what q is, and you can see I'm going to add the two together and save it into a variable called total. I print out what the contents of total is, but this time I then have this extra line here called return. And I'm saying return the value of total. And what this will do is it will send the value that's inside total back to the code that originally called the function. So my program will start and it'll print that out. I'm creating a variable called a, setting it to 10, create a variable called b, setting it to 5. And I'm creating a variable called c, and I'm setting it to the result that I get from my function. So I'm going to call the function add. Python will jump up here. The value that's inside a will get placed into p. The value that's inside b will get set into q. It'll perform its calculation and return total. So that value that's inside total will get put into c. And so then when I print out my a, b, and c, we will get whatever was inside total. So if I run this code here, you can see that that's what happened. We had program start. All right, so we set a to 10, b to 5, and then called the function. Our function came up and said p is 10. All right, q is 5. They add up to 15. And then we returned the total, which got put into C, and then we print out A, B, and C, and we can see we've got 10, 5, and 15. I can call my function as many times as I want with different values. So I can say, well, let's add together 20 and 15. All right, and then I can just print D out. Let's just do another one. Okay, so you can see here I don't have to actually use variables when I'm creating my parameters. I can use whatever I wish. And if I print E, provided it's a value the function will consider valid, it will work. All right. So we can see here that P was set to 20 and P was set to 15, and they added up to 35. And then here where I printed D, it just printed 35. P was set to 100, Q was set to 400, they add to 500, and 500 was output then here by line 19. All right, so that's a quick introduction to functions. Hope that helps understand how the program jumps around and how the values move across. This is Mr. Baumgarten signing out.